He is best known as a world-recognised eco-warrior, but there's so much more to this guest than you could ever imagine. I'm Penny Lane, and In the Driver's Seat starts now. In 1988, Wimbledon tennis champion Pat Cash teamed up with our next guest to form Planet Ark. In 15 years at the helm, the organisation has become a household name, recognised around the world for campaigns to ban plastic bags, plastic microbes and phosphates in laundry detergents. But Jon Dee is so much more than a business advocate. The winner of Armenia's highest award, the Order of Honour, a New South Wales Australian of the Year, a brilliant international speaker, and even a record producer. Jon Dee, welcome to In the Driver's Seat.
Nice to be on with you, Penny. Thank you.
My gosh, is there anything that you can't do?
Well, my career's certainly been very varied. I always believe in giving it a go, regardless of what it is. And if I have a passion, I always throw myself into it.
Let's go back to the very beginning. Were you always really environmentally aware, just from a young age?
Yes, I was. Actually, the very first time that I did recycling was, would have been about 1968, when my dad, who was a firefighter, firefighters back then had to have a second job because they were paid so badly. And I remember going and picking up the used bottles that, back in those days, you used to reuse the bottles. And so I remember going with Dad and picking those up, and even having I remember, best of all, an old lady giving me sixpence as a tip, which was a lot of money back in those days. So I figured out that being an environmentalist must pay, So that was a nice experience. But back then in school, I helped to run we used to have the milk bottle lids, that were made of aluminium. So we used to make that at school. And so that was, I think my passion for the environment was instilled in me by my granddad. He was, passionate about gardening and trees, and I think that rubbed off on me.
That's good. Now, how did Planet Ark come about?
Pat Cash and I got drunk one night in, when was it? 1991. He just lost in London. Good story. Yeah, and so he basically said, "Come around. I've got a case of Stella Artois that he got from Queen's, the tennis tournament there." And he said, "If we don't drink it tonight, it's going to go off because I'm going away for a week." And so I was a broke charity campaigner, so that was a great offer. Pat and I ended up having this amazing pizza night, and then we realized as the drunker we got, the more how passionate we both were about the environment, and we felt there was a need for an environment group that was very solutions focused, was very pro-business, and worked to create real change. So rather than whinge about the problems, try and inspire people and businesses to actually be part of the solution rather than being part of the problem.
Have you achieved what you set out to do, or do you think we can still do better?
Well, when I was with Planet Ark for, 15 years, I think we achieved everything that we needed to in that time. I was able to get top stars like Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman, Nicole Kidman, Kylie Minogue, Richard Branson, Pierce Brosnan. I went out and filmed all those people who donated their time to do environmental ads for me. So I think we mainstreamed the environment in the 1990s. We certainly mainstreamed recycling. I got the plastic bag ban up and running in Australia, which was very exciting because that's a typical day-to-day thing that people can do, that they can create real change. And then after I left Planet Ark in 2007, I then started working with businesses and the environment. And so I wrote a book on business sustainability, and much to everyone's surprise, that guidebook on how to make your business green in a way that saves you money shifted 100,000 copies in Australia. And so that then led to me working with a lot of businesses to phase out phosphates, which now results in 2 billion laundry washes a year in Australia where we don't have phosphates in them. I coordinated the initial push to get the old-fashioned incandescent globes banned in Australia, and that saved billions of dollars, and the rest of the world has followed our example on that. And so I've given hundreds of speeches in Australia and around the world to show people what they can and cannot do. And of course, my work in Armenia has continued, where I've built a music school for kids that teaches 220 kids a year. And then I've had my own TV show on Sky News, where I show businesses what they could do to help the environment. And I've written a few other books, and now currently running a PFAS campaign. So what I've been able to do with all my campaigning is actually create real change. Because I think too often environmentalists focus on the problems, and we have to do that. But I think we have to put a huge amount of effort into creating the solutions that the maximum number of people or businesses can get involved with.
You really are amazing. The way you just described that, you made it sound all so easy, but it must have taken so much work. Going back to when you were talking about all the international stars and getting all those people to front your campaigns, how did you even manage to pull that off?
Well, I've been working with a lot of famous celebrities since I was a kid. I actually turned up drunk to my key HSC equivalent exam after getting drunk with Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin when I was 18. So I used to work with a band called Yes. In fact, I'm remixing an album for Yes at the moment as one of my side hustles. And because I've always kept my interest in music going, while I've been doing all my environmental work, I still keep my passion for music going, and I have my own music studio.
Tell me a little bit about Rock Aid Armenia and what brought that about.
Well, Rock Aid Armenia was something that has been very important to me over, since 1988, when the Armenian earthquake happened. I got a phone call in the early hours of the morning from the Global Broadcasting Foundation in Washington, asking me if I could help to get an independent TV crew over the border from Turkey into Armenia, and to get the first independent crew into Armenia for the earthquake. And so I knew the Soviet ambassador. I'd just done co-produced a global broadcast with the BBC to launch World AIDS Day. And so I managed to get the crew in there, and then we organized a live satellite link between Washington and Yerevan to make sure that the doctors on the ground in Armenia could talk directly to the Red Cross and the American government to ensure that what was being sent in those planes that left that night was exactly what they needed on the ground in the earthquake zone. And then I basically, I called up David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, who I knew, and asked him if he would get involved in, if I did a remake of a song, and he said yes. We decided to make Smoke on the Water, the remake. And then I got Brian May from Queen, and then I got the guys from Yes involved. And then bit by bit, I got all the other people from bands like Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, and Bon Jovi, Led Zeppelin, you name it. I got them involved, and we had a top 40 hit with that record. It's had over 23 million views on YouTube, and it's a bit of rock and roll history. And the good thing there is that as part of that, not only did we help kids on the ground in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake, which was just shocking in the impact it had on children. My friend Ara Tadavosian and I, we relaunched Rock Aid Armenia in 2009, and basically built a music school that now teaches 220 kids a year. It's one of the best music schools in Armenia. We've packed it full of brand new gear. We had the people from Deep Purple and Black Sabbath fly to Armenia with me to help launch it. And the great news is it's going really strong, and the kids are doing, learning how to not only play rock and roll music, but also play their own Armenian music as well.
I absolutely love that. That's phenomenal. Ozzy Osbourne's from the same town as me. And funny enough, when you mentioned Smoke on the Water, one of my foster sons, that was the first song he learned to play on the guitar. I think it's the first song all kids learn to play, isn't it? Smoke on the Water. Congratulations.
Yeah, I think it's banned. It's actually banned in most, guitar shops. You're not allowed to actually play it. No, that and Stairway to Heaven. I think it's the two things. I remember when David Gilmour said, "What song are we playing?" And I said, "Look, I want to do Smoke on the Water." He said, "Oh, can't you choose something else?" And I said, "Look, you're not a great guitar player, mate. It's a song at least you can play, and so that was a bit of fun." So,
would you ever tempted to become a musician yourself?
Look, I've got my own music studio, so I've got about 20 synthesizers. I used to know Vangelis quite well and hang out with him in his studio in London, and when he was making Chariots of Fire and the Blade Runner soundtracks. And so that inspired me to kind of make my own music that way. So during COVID, that was my COVID project. I actually built my own studio building and that's where I put all my synthesizers and recording equipment. So it's something which I really enjoy. My main passion, I guess, is production and mixing. So at the moment, I'm remixing an album for the band Yes, and that's coming out globally, I think, in about 3 months' time. So that's been a lot of fun remixing that one.
Yeah, I bet it has. Fantastic. And your list goes on and on. What about National Tree Day and National Recycling Week? What can you tell us about those? Because you've been the brains behind some of the biggest campaigns that the world has ever seen.
Well, National Tree Day was really important to me and continues to be important to me. It's something that I was very lucky that Olivia Newton-John and I were good friends for over 30 years. And I was in Los Angeles at Olivia's house, and we were doing some filming together. And we got talking about why it was so important to get kids to plant trees, because we both felt there was a need to really crank that up, because we planted trees as kids, but it wasn't being done back in the early 90s. And so Olivia and I were talking, and we said there needs to be I'm both looking at each other, trying to come up with what the name. And at exactly the same time, we both said a National Tree Day. And it was like, wow, okay, that's a moment. And so I said, well, if I get that up and running, will you front it with me? And so she said yes. And so that's how we co-founded National Tree Day, and that's now planted over 28 million trees here in Australia. And Olivia and I then went on, after I left Planet Ark, to start a new initiative, a global initiative called One Tree Per Child. And so that's been planting trees in 11 countries, and that's been very exciting. And the first city we did that with was the city of Bristol, where basically I was in Naples giving a speech and reading the Financial Times after the speech. And I saw this article that said, new independent mayor in Bristol wants to get kids planting trees. And I thought, oh, when I get back to Australia, I'll get in touch with him. And then I turned the page and it said, cheap air flights, Naples to Bristol. And I thought, okay. I called up the airline. They had one seat left. And then I called the mayor's office and said, what's he doing for dinner that night? And they said, you want to fly from Naples to Bristol just to talk about tree planting with kids? And I said, yes. And so that night I was having dinner with the mayor of Bristol. And so Bristol became the first city in the world to do one tree per child. And we've now planted over 100,000 trees and shrubs with all the primary schools in Bristol in that period since we did that. So, and that's just one of the cities that's done the One Tree Per Child initiative.
That is absolutely fantastic. So there's more to Bristol than Banksy. That is a really, really good initiative. What else needs to be done, do you think?
Well, I think one of the key issues right now, I think for all of us, is PFAS, the forever chemicals, that we've had in firefighting foam. We've had it in Scotchgard. We've had it in lots of products where these are chemicals that basically get into your bloodstream and they've got into drinking water. And I live in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. And we found out last June that the Water Authority, Sydney Water, had never tested our water for PFAS, forever chemicals. And it's important because PFAS chemicals are linked to cancer. And in America, where this has been a really big issue, many cities and towns have had to be blood tested because they've ended up with these PFAS chemicals in their drinking water as a result of firefighting foam getting into the drinking water supply. And we found out last June that is exactly what's happened here in the Blue Mountains, this pristine environment that we all moved to bring up our kids, or to bring, for people who were already living here. And we found that our water supply was contaminated. And so the drinking water we had levels of PFAS chemicals that are linked to cancer at 4 times the new safe level that we have in Australia and 4 times the safe level in America. And so we've since been doing, I launched a campaign to get a water treatment plant set up so we could remove those PFAS chemicals. The New South Wales government has committed to put $80 to $100 million on a permanent plant. We've got a temporary one in place at the moment. So we've solved that problem, but The problem is we've been drinking that PFAS chemicals in our drinking water for more than 30 years because it was a petrol tanker crash in 1992 where we ended up getting TV footage showing the firefighting foam going straight into the water supply. It literally crashed right by the entrance to the water supply in our area. And so we've now been doing blood tests that I've been organising, and we found, myself included, we've got really high levels of these chemicals in our body. So we're now doing a class action against the New South Wales government because they're refusing to do free blood tests. Even though it's a government agency that supplied us with this contaminated water. And so we're having to, like many other communities around the world, go legal in order to get the free blood tests and the medical care that our community needs. And because this affects about 80,000 people who've been drinking this water over the years.
Gosh, that's really scary. Is it reversible?
It is. So the problem is there are so many people up here in the Blue Mountains who've got very high levels of cholesterol. That's one of the known side effects. And my cholesterol level was 7.5, and I've managed to get that down to 5.2. But so many people up here have cancer, and our concern is, has that come about from them drinking tap water that we were told is amongst the best in the world? And so our concern is how many people have died or been injured because of this. But the good news is if you do get a blood test, and they're $500 each, which is why we're trying to get them for free, you can then take cholesterol, which is called Questrin, which helps to reverse the PFAS contamination, and you can also give blood or donate plasma, and that also reduces the PFAS in your blood. And so we know these things work because firefighters that were exposed to firefighting foam, they've undertaken some of these initiatives, and we've looked at studies around the world on how they've reduced PFAS levels in people's blood, and so that's what we're doing here in the Blue Mountains. And so that's my latest campaign that I'm heading up.
That is absolutely incredible. You've achieved so much. We're out of time, but I need to talk to you for so much longer. Last question for you. Having had so much success in your life and changing the world, literally, how do you gauge success?
I think success is defined by measurable outcomes. With, for example, with the Incandescent Globe campaign, we can measure the success of that in terms of billions of dollars saved, and in terms of greenhouse emissions reduction as well, because you're not creating so much power at the coal-fired power stations. I think with things like plastic bags, you can measure demonstrable reductions in plastic bag use. With the phosphates that I've managed to get out of laundry detergents in Australia, that's 2 billion laundry washes a year that do not have phosphates that pollute our waterways. And so what I always try and do is make sure that whenever I start a campaign, right at the very start of that campaign, I know exactly what the outcome is that is what I'm aiming for. What does success look like? If you know exactly what that is at the start of the campaign, then you've got your focus on that into the horizon. And so that's how I always try and make sure that I get a result at the end of any campaign that I start. And so far, I've been able to do that. So touch wood, that will continue.
Thank you. That is such good advice, and congratulations on your success. Jon Dee, thanks for joining us in the driver's seat.
Thanks for having me.
In the driver's seat is brought to you by the Perfect Cosmetics Company. This is Ticker, and we'll be right back.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.